Broncos country? Thanks for joining me back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for another edition of Broncos Now. I'm your host, Sydney Jones, and I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. It was so great seeing you all out here on Saturday for Back Together Saturday. Yesterday was an off day, but the Broncos were back at it here at the UC Health Training Center today for day 5 of training camp. So coming up on today's episode, we'll hear from head coach Nathaniel Hackett and get his reactions from the day as the players practiced with pads for the first time this camp. We'll also discuss observations from practice as the offense got off to a slow start. Plus, KJ Hamler was activated off the PUP list this morning. We'll hear from him and more coming up. The Broncos wore shoulder pads today for the first time this camp. Full pads go on tomorrow, but it was so nice to finally see some real football and see some real action out there. Coach Hackett reacts to it being the first padded practice of camp and what stood out to him.
First and foremost, coming off a day off, getting used to that. You know, I think some of us had a little bit of a slow start, so we got to address that. But I think that the defense did some really good things. I think there were some pads that were popping, which is always awesome. Got to run some different run schemes that we wanted to get to that you typically only do with pads, so got to see some of those. So there was some good stuff, a lot of missed opportunities that we got to continually grow on and capitalize on.
Like Coach Hackett said, this offense got off to a slow start in today's practice. Even Russell Wilson rounded the entire offense up into a huddle to try and get them back on track. Guard Dalton Reisner said that this team can continuously learn from Russell every single day.
So we got to get going. The situation, we were down 14 points. All these different situations, right? These coaches do a great job of putting us in different scenarios of how much we're down and how quickly we got to score and what yardage we got to get. And in that situation, we were down 14, and he said, this is where we got to roll. You know, it might not have been the prettiest practice thus far, but let's wipe that away and let's get moving forward. That's what championship ball is all about. So I think we can continuously learn from Russell Wilson on this team. Anybody. I've been in the league 3 years. It don't matter. I'm gonna listen to that guy every single day. Just see how he approaches the game, how he approaches situations like that, brings the team together. So that's kind of what that was all about, rallying us together. Hey, let's get moving forward.
The offense rebounded later in practice, though, during red zone work. Russell threw back-to-back touchdown passes to Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy in the end zone, getting the offense back into their groove.
The name of the game is, crazy things go back and forth all the time. I mean, long touchdown, how are you going to respond? Interception, how are you going to respond? And you need those moments. Guys jumping off sides, lack of focus. Hopefully they can take, from this day and learn why it happened. Why weren't they focused? Why weren't they focused as a group? Because I know they work so hard. I know they know it. I know they don't want it to be that way. But the idea is to learn from that moment so then once you're out on the field and crowd is screaming, it doesn't happen again, or we can bounce back quickly.
KJ Hamler was activated off the PUP list today and was back at practice. Coach Hackett said it seemed like the right time for KJ, but they're going to slowly work KJ back into practice, and it might still be a while until he gets those team reps.
I'm going to feel good. It feel a little weird, but, a little tired, just trying to get back used to it, but it felt good being back out there finally.
What about it felt weird?
Yeah, I ain't put pads on them years. It's a different feeling. You got to get, a little extra weight on you, Got to get back in a little bit of more shape, so that's about it, though.
KJ went on and opened up about his mental health struggles throughout his journey rehabbing and being away from the game last year. He said he doesn't take a single day for granted.
Most of everybody, especially on the team, I tell them I love them every day. You'll never know when your last day is, and I started to appreciate that more as I got older. I feel like when we're younger and we're kids, we don't realize, how much your dad or your mom wants you to say, or just call up on them and check up on them and just say, hey, I love you, I miss you. That's all I want to say. You know what I mean? That means a lot. So, I take every day, every step. I'm blessed, just because I can get out of bed and walk on 2 feet. You know what I mean? Some people can't do that. You know what I mean? So I'm just very blessed right now. That I'm even out here in front of y'all, talking to y'all, and just being out here just to play ball, So football brought me back to life, and I'm grateful.
Now it's time to welcome Broncos lead writer Eric Delahunt on the show. Eric, thanks so much for joining me here again in the podcast studio.
Of course, Sydney. I'll try to look in the correct spot today.
I know our fans on YouTube don't really love where you're looking.
Do my best up here at the camera. You, Sid, we'll
figure it out. Well, Eric, pads were finally on today at practice, but a slow start for the offense today. What really went wrong for them early on?
Yeah, I think it was a lack of focus, maybe more than a lack of execution. You saw, I think, 3 false starts within the first couple of team periods. they weren't quite on the mark with executing the plays either. Obviously, Russell Wilson went deep to Cortland Sutton a couple of times. Pat Surtain, the second, broke up both those passes. But at the end of the day, I think it was mainly that pre-snap stuff. And that sometimes happens when you're coming off an off day, right? Guys are relaxed. They're trying to ease back into things. Well, you've got to be ready to go. And after that third false start penalty, Russell Wilson gathered the whole offense together and said, enough of this. We got to get going. And we did see them react to that and kind of respond the right way. But you're right. Early on, it did not look great.
It didn't. And yeah, you did say that they did bounce back later in practice during some red zone work. We saw a nice couple touchdowns from Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Nice to see them kind of get back in their groove later on.
Yeah, the execution was much better down there in the red zone. The Jerry Jeudy was kind of a busted coverage from the defense, so I don't know how much I put into that one. But in terms of the Cortland Sutton, it's a great throw from Russell Wilson, a great route from Cortland Sutton, who kept Pat Surtain kind of like pinned on his back where he wouldn't be able to get to the ball. And that, to me, shows what this offense can do when it's rolling. And I think most importantly is that even though things went poorly at the beginning, they stuck with it. They were able to find that success. And Nathaniel Hackett said after practice, that's what you have to do in a game. And Russell Wilson, throughout his career, has shown the ability that even when he falls behind, you're not out of a game. And the last few years, when the Broncos have gone down 10 points, 14 points, for the most part, that's been it. They're not going to win that football game. It's kind of a turn the page to next week. How can you rebound, against a different team? But with Russell Wilson, I think you're going to stay in some of those games. You're going to have a better chance. And so to see the way they rebounded there at the end of practice, that shows you that. And maybe the biggest thing that I noticed was not a play at all. During a special teams period, Russell Wilson and Cortland Sutton stayed down at one end of the field, and they worked for 10 minutes, 15 minutes on the same two routes over and over because they missed those in an earlier red zone session. They came back. They figured out, hey, what went wrong? They threw those again and again and again. That's good leadership from Russell Wilson. That's the way to step up if you're Cortland Sutton. That's what's going to make this Broncos team different because, listen, you're going to have times when you're not playing well. You're going to fall behind. If you can find a way to rebound from that, that's what makes you a special team. I think we saw kind of the hints you want to see from this Broncos offense.
And Eric, talking about some of these offensive weapons, we heard from KJ Hamler earlier in the show. Excited to have him back. I know he's excited to be back. What do you expect from him, and how do you think he fits into this offense?
Yeah, I mean, first, I know you talked about it earlier, but just kudos to KJ for sharing what he shared today. It's not easy to do that, especially in front of a group of people that's, widely strangers to him. Hasn't really been able to develop those relationships that we would normally develop in a locker room setting. A lot of it's been over Zoom. So props to KJ first and foremost. But from a football standpoint, the Broncos have missed KJ. I thought when Jerry Jeudy got hurt last year in week 1 against the Giants that the Broncos receiving core was going to kind of suffer immediately. Yeah. And I think what you saw more of was that when KJ Hamler got hurt, that's when things really changed because the offense all of a sudden didn't have that speed guy that could test the safety, that could push the corners back, that could make it so if you didn't honor him, you're going to throw it over the top. And if you do give him too much respect, well, they're just going to dink and dunk underneath, or they're going to find guys like Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy for intermediate gains. So that's where I thought the Broncos missed KJ Hamler. And even with Russell Wilson and Cortland and Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick and Alberto and all these guys, to have a guy with blazing speed like KJ, it just brings a different dynamic to the offense. And so whenever he's back at 100%, whether that's in the preseason or just for week 1, he's going to change what Nathaniel Hackett's able to do in offense. And that's really exciting to think about.
KJ said today that he's still in that 21 to 23 miles per hour range, which is where he wants to be.
That's pretty fast.
That's really fast. That's what I was thinking too. Well, let's take a look at some of the guys on the defense real quick. Baron Browning seems to be having a great camp so far. It seems that moving him back outside to where he played in college has been the right move so far. What have you seen from him during the past couple of days?
Yeah, it's interesting. The Broncos drafted Nick Bonito because of his bend, his ability to get off the edge, that first step, the speed. In a lot of ways, Baron Browning is a very similar player. We've heard guys talk about the bend that he has off the line of scrimmage. We previously heard Nick Bonito compared to Von Miller in terms of that bend, and I think you see some of the same things from Baron. I'm not sure it's going to be an overnight success. I don't know that he's going to go in and have 3 sacks week 1 or anything like that, but I do think he's shown great promise so far. He's giving the offensive line headaches every day, it seems like. Monday was no different, had a couple of strong rushes that might have resulted in sacks in a game. I'm really excited to see what Barron does when the pads go on, but also when we get some live action in a couple weeks against Dallas, because that's a chance to say, okay, well, you can get past an offensive lineman with your speed. Do you have the size? Do you have the power to kind of finish the job? Or you obviously can't use a speed rush every time you rush the passer. You've got to set up with other moves. Mm-hmm. How does the rest of his game kind of shape up? How does he do in run support? Those are all big questions he's going to have to answer. But so far, I think that signs are really positive for Baron Browning. And the good news, Sydney, is if the Broncos need to, they can always shift him back inside in a pinch.
It's true.
Because he knows this defense. Yep. He played a lot at inside linebacker last year. So they'd love to keep him at outside linebacker, but he's got that potential to go back and forth. That's really valuable as you try to build a roster.
Well, speaking of inside linebacker, Josie Jewell, nice to see him out there after being injured all last season. You know, he had a nice diving pass breakup today during practice. What does he really add to this defense, Eric? What do you like about him?
Yeah, I mean, George Payton has said he's the glue to this defense. He's one of the emotional leaders, obviously, has helped call plays on the defensive side of the ball. And so there's that emotional aspect, that leadership aspect to Josie Jewell, but he's also just a really good football player. Mm-hmm. And last year in Jacksonville, before he got hurt, I think he was the best defensive player on the field. You know, watching him fly around, he made an impact on that game in a way that nobody else really was, including a guy like Von Miller, who had a strong start to last season. And so I think people underrate what Josie Jewell is as an athlete and what he brings to this defense. Obviously, he's had an up-and-down career since being drafted. He was a starter for a while, then he wasn't, then he regained a starting role. But it's clear to me how much he's grown over the last few years, and he was a guy that I thought was an underrated signing this offseason for the Broncos to keep him here. They're going to be much better on the inside this year because of Josie Jewell.
Well, more to talk about tomorrow as full pads go on. Eric, appreciate your time.
Of course, Sydney.
Following practice today, we caught up with safety Justin Simmons to get his thoughts on this year's defense. He said he loves the way this defense competes and praises Pat Surtain.
Not too many guys in the league that are Pat Surtain in the way he's competing, man. And the good thing about it is, like, there's really not much that phases him, and it's only going into year two. Hasn't even started year two yet, and the poise that he has, you know, I think it helps the whole unit play with a lot more confidence. So I'm just really excited, you know, all around. I think we got a really good team. And, I mean, your secondary is only going to be as good as your defense. And, you know, if you're out there covering forever and you don't have a rush, you know, you're not going to have a good secondary. So, I mean, our pass rush is great. I'm glad to see Chubb out there. Can't wait to get Randy back. Malik looks great. I mean, Barron and Nick, they look great. Our D-line looks amazing. I mean, the penetration they get. And then, I mean, Jonas and Josie and Alex and Justin and all those guys, man, flying around at the linebacker position. I'm sorry, I could keep going. I get excited thinking about our defense, man. It's really fun playing with them.
An inside linebacker, Josie Jewell, also discusses his chemistry with Jonas Griffith.
It's good. I mean, I think we could be a little better here and there, but definitely a lot of communication. Just trying to, you know, maybe do it over the top sometimes. Just try to understand that we can always talk a little bit more and always give somebody else maybe a tip, whether it be offense is showing us a tip where the guard is pulling, or, you know, whether Z is close and he's going to come an in route or something like that. So, you know, we try to keep it clean out there and try to communicate as much as possible, but it can always be cleaner.
Now it's time to take a look at today's injury update. Billy Turner and Randy Gregory remain on the PUP list. KJ Hamler was activated off the PUP list this morning, like I mentioned earlier in the show. Tom Compton and K'Wan Williams were not at practice today. Coach Hackett updated the media on K'Wan today and said they're going to be smart with him and evaluate it day by day. Tight end Greg Dulcich participated in individual drills for the first time in camp today, but then worked out on a side field again once team period started. And wide receiver Tyree Cleveland went into the locker room during practice. Coach Hackett said he got hit in the throat and he's still being evaluated. That'll do it for today's episode of Broncos Now. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you all right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube tomorrow for day 6 of training camp and the first day of full pads. I'll see you all then.